Let me put that away so I don't fill the podcast with drumming noises.
It's Thursday, September 19th, 2024. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we are reviewing the Lupin III Kabuki Production. So, we're back doing Geek Nights like normal. So, I've been biking to and from work because I have to go to the office 4 days a week. Not like
That's
Amazon with the 5 days a week now. But, so a thing about New York is that the west side of Manhattan has a mixed-use path for like biking and running and like pedestrian activities that goes from
the most trafficked path of its kind in the United States, perhaps North America.
Easily, because it just goes from the bottom tip of Manhattan to basically the top of Manhattan uninterrupted, and it's great. But the problem is it's fully on the west side, and all the things in Manhattan are, it's an island, so they're usually not on the edge. All the buildings are kind of in the middle mostly, except Hudson Yards and like a couple others, like the Javits Center, really. Which means it's really nice, but it's primarily for recreation. There are very limited circumstances where it is useful as transportation.
There's a lot of people who use it for transportation who commute. Basically, a lot of people live in northern Manhattan and commute. They'll use it to go way south, right? Because they got to go a whole bunch south, and they can go a whole bunch south without any car, and that saves time. And then to get to work, they just got to go a little bit east wherever they stop.
Well, when I worked downtown by City Hall, even though the west side was kind of out of my way, often before, the New York City bike infrastructure is like an order of magnitude better than it was back then. I would often bike home on the west side, despite that adding a couple miles to my total distance travel, just because it was more pleasant.
Well, yeah, I mean, even it's probably also, faster, right? It's like, the total distance is longer, but instead of going north, you still have to go north the same amount to get to the bridge. So it's like, okay, you do an extra east and an extra west.
But you're not stopping at 40 cross streets along the way.
All your north is just this straight shot with no stopping, almost no stopping.
But the east side of Manhattan has always been kind of a shit show.
Yeah.
It's like there is a path there, but parts of it are designated bike friendly, but they've basically got something that's one step short of cobblestone, so biking on it sucks. There's other sections of it that just aren't connected. Like there'll be a bike path and then it just dead ends, and then you got to go all the way in and around and back, and then a bike path just starts up again somewhere else. The UN is just plopped in the middle of where a good bike path would be. It's not as good, even though the east side would be extremely useful to a million people.
Path, you need a path to go around all the edges in a complete circle, and you need something in the middle too. I think they should just take Park Avenue, which already on summer streets they open Park Avenue, so that there's no cars,
and it's called Park Avenue. Just make it a park.
It was a park originally.
Turn it back into a park, top to bottom.
It still has a park in the middle of it, but it used to be more park.
Yeah.
That's where the name came from. It's now less park than it used to be, but it's still more park than the other avenues. But they should just, I think, permanently remove all cars from Park Avenue all the way from top to bottom. And it's just, other modes of transportation only. And it's like, it doesn't hurt them on Saturday morning. Well, it wouldn't hurt them the other days. It's like, just do it.
But so two notable incidents have occurred in this space, because that's the way I bike home now, the east side. Not the full east side because it's not connected, but First Ave, Second Ave is where I bike to and from work. So one, they have finally done something that was so long in the making that I just assumed, I wasn't sure if it would ever happen. There's a tunnel that kind of goes under the UN Plaza for cars.
Right. So on First Avenue, in this area where you can't go because there is no path, the UN is there, and there's nothing but water behind it. Water you don't want to touch.
Yep.
So you have to be on, the way to go north is to go on First Avenue, the easternmost avenue, and it has a bike path pretty much almost for all of its
length. It used to not have a bike path. That was a rough commute before that bike path.
Yeah, and you would just go up First Avenue, and in front of the UN, you could just bike on First Avenue, but there's also a secret, not so secret tunnel that you can use to bypass basically it's like in the middle of First Avenue, there's a tunnel.
Yep.
And you can go to the left or right of it to just stay outside in the open air, or you can go in the tunnel and come out on First Avenue, just much further north.
It's like a little express lane.
Yeah, it's like basically it's a little skipper.
So years ago, because one thing that it's cool and also annoying to live in a place like New York City, because like whenever the UN's in session, it fucks up my commute to work. Like that's just a thing.
Somehow they don't let cars on all those roads when the UN's in session and the world doesn't explode. Why?
Kind of like how Republicans, despite being so pro-gun, won't let people bring guns to any of their events. But a few years ago, when the UN went into session, they took that tunnel, and they don't let cars go down there when the UN's in session, but they just had the bike path go through there. Like they just made it part of the bike path temporarily. And
yeah, I mean, even if someone on a bicycle tries to bomb,
you can only carry so many explosives on a bike. Like
it's not gonna impact it. It'll be the worst bomb I ever the most ineffective kaboom.
Yep. So now they've made this. They've taken one of these car lanes and made it a double wide, separated bike lane through the tunnel. You can still go on top of the tunnel and connect to the side streets, or take the tunnel like the express lane on a bike. It's so luxurious. I actually kept track for the last 2 weeks since it's been active. It has shaved on average 3 minutes off of my commute.
Look, because if you go around the normal way without the tunnel,
you got to stop like
bike,
5 times.
Right. It's the area over there, near there's the park near the Japan Society.
Yeah, there's always people protesting right there. Then you got to deal with there's always a UN protest.
And there's that weird little turny bit where you got to go on the sidewalk for a second, technically, but you don't.
Oh, did you see what they did to the turny bit? They drew the bike lane. The sidewalk now has the no pedestrian sign there, and they drew the bike lane green going over that sidewalk bit.
Oh, well, then what are people who are walking supposed to do?
They're supposed to walk on the other side of that little barrier, and they've redone the whole area.
Oh, I see the little barrier.
Yeah,
okay.
they moved a bunch of stuff around. It's
right. The point is like biking through there is sort of like you're slowing down, you're going uphill, and you're sort of going at each different. It's like it's not just a straight line. It's like these little challenges.
It's like 3 different challenges of intersections that each have a unique problem that is annoying.
Yeah. Even though there is a bike lane, it's just the road there is weird, and you sort of have to at 3 different junctures think and look and see. Whereas if you just go in the tunnel, you just bypass all that and just go whoop.
So the first time I ran into that tunnel, I saw it. I was like, oh my God, it's open. Hot damn, I'm going to bike in there. This is great. And in front of me, what immediately happens is a confused car just drives into the bike lane and then gets stuck.
Okay.
like right away. And then is trying to back out, and I can't get around him, and it's like the whole fucking thing happens. And then a couple days ago, I think, oh yeah, it's open, and now they've painted it. So I get my phone out while I'm biking through it. I get a little video like, hey everybody, all my friends in New York, this tunnel's open, check it out. And just as I'm getting my phone out, a car tries to go into it, realizes their mistake, and backs out, and then gets stuck on the sidewalk.
Okay.
So I'm assuming they're gonna fix
I don't know why
that.
they don't just they could put there's a technique that they don't use often enough, which is just put one metal pylon in the middle. Yeah, just one metal one, the kind that has a little lock that locks to the ground.
Yep.
You know that kind.
Yep, because then if you need to use it like emergency, you open the lock and you set it down.
Right. It's like those are used all over the place, and it's like, yeah, you just put one of those in there, and nobody's going to be driving into that by accident, and if they do,
So a second thing that happened over in that area, so that they've built this pure bike path and walking path to the north of the UN that looks like it's going to bypass the UN, but it suddenly dead ends, and there's like a temporary barrier on it where clearly they intend to eventually build it forward, but it's New York. That's like a 50-year project, so we'll see if that ever happens. And then on the other side of the UN, there's a park that they connected to some bike lanes that extends pretty far north and then also just dead ends. And apparently, a tunnel in New York flooded recently, and it flooded because a guy on a boat, the boat drifted way from where he was supposed to be, and then he drilled like 100 feet down right into one of the tunnels and immediately started flooding it from the river.
He was doing exploratory work for a path that would go behind the UN and complete the path.
So I guess all the takeaway here is the bike infrastructure is getting better in New York and continues to get better at a rate that is both too slow, but also way faster than my wildest expectations were.
Yeah, it's like, if you look at places that are actually doing it properly, and you see some European places and some other famous bike places.
I mean,
you're
France
like, wow,
had
we are garbage.
France, over the course of about 5 years, like Paris, went from hell to biking to one of the most bike-friendly cities in the world.
Yeah, people are like, oh, you can't do it quickly. It's like, I bet here's proof it has been done. Therefore, you were wrong. But it's like someone who says, oh, grass isn't green. Well, here is some green grass. Explain this. I have it.
It was just funny that, like, I see there's the news of, the tunnel flooded and, like, a contractor fucked up. And that was, like, the news. But all I saw reading the article was, holy shit, he's working on that bike path. The one I didn't think they'd ever
someone's
make.
actually working on that and not just...
It's like the 4 levels of happening in New York are... There's a plan from 50 years ago that's clearly just nothing's happening. One person is doing one thing. I can see construction or it's done. Like, those are the 4 phases.
Pretty much.
So in some news, so for a long time, early Geek Nights, like, I used to buy everything on Amazon because I didn't want to go to the store, and Amazon was pretty good. There's definitely been a transition, as we've talked about, where I actually don't really trust pretty much anything I could buy from Amazon to be safe.
It's hard, it depends on what you're buying, but it's like, since they let third-party sellers sell things on Amazon and commingled the inventory on various items of certain, depending on circumstances, like a lot of different things you could buy on there, you don't know what you're getting. There have been like, counterfeit, health products, right? And it's like, even if you save a couple bucks, it's like, if you're not getting the real deal of whatever you're buying, sometimes it's important.
I ordered a Dell Ultra Sharp that was from the Dell store on Amazon, and what was shipped to me was not a Dell Ultra Sharp, but some, like, bullshit crapo monitor.
That's a confusing thing. It's like, Amazon has, like, these stores for brands that are built into Amazon, and when you go to those stores, you feel like you're buying directly from that brand, but actually what it is it's just sort of an aggregation of listings for that brand's products in a way that the brand organized. And you actually have to look when you go to the listing and look on the right side where it'll tell you sold by, shipped by, in very, very small text, by the way, that is not accessible to anyone with a vision problem, to figure out, who actually provided, who you're actually buying from.
So my trust level of Amazon to buy physical goods is it's circling the drain, shall we say. But
at least if you're buying a Kindle book, it won't be counterfeit.
Yeah. But there are other websites that are, like, so far down the drain that I would have never trusted them day one. Specifically, Temu and Shein.
I think it's Temu. I don't know. So if people don't know, the way these sites came about is it's sort of a scam where they are using money, right? Investor money or money from other sources to basically just sell shit at a loss. And it's already garbage stuff anyway. All right. It's obviously if you're selling at a loss, you want to sell it less of a loss, right? So you get really low cost stuff, and then you have a negative margin on it. And the idea is to just get customers and market share to be big.
And then you profit. Maybe you never profit. Who knows?
Maybe you're right. But this is a tried and true plan used by companies like, Uber and famously, but lots of Silicon Valley companies. These aren't Silicon Valley companies, but they're using that same strategy of just get big, get loyal customers with low prices. And they got lots of wild products on there, right?
And they are like, if I trust Amazon 5%, I trusted these websites day one, negative infinity percent. Like, you could not convince me to ever interact with these websites, not just because of bootlegs, because, like, I have bought bootleg things on purpose before. I'm not mad about bootlegs. I just want bootleg. I want to know it's a bootleg. Like, if I buy a Rolex from the guy in the street, I know exactly what I'm buying, and it's not a Rolex.
Yeah, the Shine is specifically like, the cheapest fast fashion garbage clothing that will fall apart.
Like you
in 2
think an
seconds,
H&M
made
shirt,
in a sweatshop.
an H&M shirt only lasts like a season. This is stuff that'll last like one washing.
Yeah. It's like, even if you're low, even if you are someone who like doesn't have a lot of money, because normally I would recommend to people, it's like, yeah, buy like the high quality clothing that will last a long time. And, you know, you'll actually save money long term, because even though you spent $500 on a jacket, that jacket lasts as long as more than five $100 jackets last.
Yep, it's Terry Pratchett's boot theory. It's really expensive to be poor because you can't buy the good boots.
It'll be comfier. It'll look more stylish. It'll just, it's, you know, just don't spend $5,000 on a jacket because it has a name brand of some luxury brand on it and isn't actually better as a jacket, right? So the Temu is like the opposite, where it's like, okay, if you're really low and unfortunate in your funds, it's like you're better off just going to Costco or Target
or even Amazon,
Walmart. Right, or even Amazon, maybe not Amazon, but to buy cheap clothing, because the Temu clothing will literally, like, it is so cheap, it'll have a hole in it in like 2 seconds.
So
most of the time,
but that's
any money you saved
news.
is going to be lost because you're going to have to buy another one so quickly.
So that's all priced in to the equation. The news I've got is so much worse than that, and this is the kind of thing that. It's one of the things I am primarily afraid of when it comes to these shitty websites and Amazon, but the degree is what is shocking here. So the government of South Korea, in an investigation, found that basically everything you can buy from Shein and Temu doesn't just have lead in it. Like, you're going to assume this bootleg crap has lead in it. It has like shocking amounts of lead in it. They're talking, what did they buy? They bought a pair of flip-flops that had 229 times the legal limit of phthalates, which are dangerous to humans. They're talking hundreds of times the lead exposure limits in like a t-shirt.
Like, even though where is the lead in the t-shirt? You put it on, it's really heavy. Like, what is it? Yeah, was it an X-ray? Was it one of those ones for the X-ray at the dentist?
So where this comes from, and basically they found that pretty much anything you can buy on these sites is full of lead, cadmium, and various carcinogens. Like, it's so toxic. Now, where the lead comes from is actually pretty interesting.
Every single product on the whole site.
Just about. Like, this is read this article and then like look at the follow-ups of this investigation. France had a similar investigation and had similar findings. Arguably, pretty much all countries with any concept of safety standards should be banning these websites. But where the lead comes from specifically has been a common problem for a long time. And it boils down to the machinery that's used to make bootleg crap is usually made so cheaply that the alloys are just full of lead and scrap metal. Like the machines they use to make the stuff are themselves made out of metals that will leach toxicity or themselves into the products. And other products are laced with lead to make them heavier because they get paid by the pound. Even making something like 0.1% heavier in bulk will make you some money because lead is cheaper than whatever it is the person's buying. And there's a lot going on here, but basically, do not ever buy things from these fucking websites. They are poisoning you, irrespective of how crappy this stuff is. So you got some news?
Yeah, what was my news?
The Chicago way.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, I remember back when I was in school, and you would have to write some citations on your papers so that you didn't get in trouble or whatever.
My high school made us use APA and instead of IPA or IPE.
We used MLS style.
MLS. We used APA for some reason.
But yeah, so we had to like look up. We had like these, you know, or the teacher would usually just photocopy like a guide that would show you the correct punctuation. It was really important in your bibliography to use the exact right punctuation for all your citations.
And it was complicated. It was like, this part's italic, there's a period here. This part's not, there's a period here. Got a carriage return here.
Yep. And only much later in life did I learn that really, especially if you're making a book of some kind, you really just want to use the Chicago Manual of Style. That's like what newspaper people use. It's like, that's the real one.
Yeah.
Those other ones, I'm sure there are people in different use cases that use other ones, but the Chicago ones, that's the one.
Yeah.
Right? And so they print a new edition of it every 7 years. And that happens to be this year. The Chicago Manual of Style 18. So if you do any writing or publish any text and you care about the text, not just your citations, right? But all the rest of the text being formatted in a consistent style that is, publishable or whatever, it is useful to obtain the Chicago Manual of Style by some means. Piracy, or buying an old edition at a used bookstore.
Hey, a bootleg digital good can't poison you.
That's right. So, just letting people know, 18, supposedly the release date is like soon, like a few days from now. But when I was at the bookstore in Portland, I saw 18 on the shelf and I said, hey, isn't that only going to be released like in a few weeks? And how is they have that here already? Personally, I decided to buy the 18th edition because this way, the book version, because the digital version, although the digital version will get updated, do I really need updates? It's like, I'm not in the publishing business. This is good enough for all my purposes. And also, it'll last at least 7 years, probably longer, because even 7 years from now, it's like, oh, this is only one edition old. And it's like, how much has really changed? I feel like this thing's going to last me at least 14 to 21 years.
I feel like I should buy this too, because I have a hardcover book on my desk that I've had for 16-ish years, and it is Stephen Few, the chart guy. It's his book on the correct design of charts to show different kinds of data. To this day, I reference this hardcover book on at least a weekly basis in my actual life. I use this book so much, I feel like it would be stupid for me to not also buy the Chicago Manual of Style. Similarly.
But yeah, so this is going to last a long time. And if you buy the paper edition, even legally, even though it's expensive and big and takes up a lot of space, you don't have to keep paying for it with a subscription or any other kind of bullshit.
Like in the old days when you could just buy Adobe software as is instead of Creative Cloud.
So, based on your situation, I would recommend not buying it at all, buying an old edition cheaply, pirating a digital edition, or buying the current edition, or I guess if you're in the business, you're probably already subscribed to the digital version and always have everything up to date all the time. But this will come very much in handy, for things like making websites or formatting various documents in the English language, especially book type documents.
Yeah, I would also say, this is some professional advice because, I terrifyingly realize that I have 17 years of experience in in capital markets. I'm an old guy now. I would say broadly that younger people coming into these professional industries, in my wide experience over the last several years, are increasingly unable to format documents in a way that makes sense. Their writing is kind of just big blobs all over the place. And I think it would behoove people who want to make a good impression professionally to have a style guide of some kind that you follow, because having a style guide means you don't have to think about that part. You can focus on what you're trying to say instead of exactly how you're saying it. You don't want to be the person who always is thinking, do I capitalize this letter or not? Just look it up, do whatever the book says, and move on to your idea.
Yep. It's also worth noting that it's really nice to have something, at least for the kind of way I think, it's nice to have a something that says, follow this. This is exactly how you do it. There isn't a lot of ambiguity in the manual of style.
Yeah, it's something I actually struggle to do well as a manager in my life all these years, to be explicit. A lot of people say oh, I don't want to be micromanaged, but it's not micromanagement to tell someone, here's exactly what I want you to do. There's a lot.
It's so thick because it's covering every edge case.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, so if you go on Amazon right now, where you might want to buy from somewhere else,
don't buy it from Temu.
But at least they won't send you a book that's made of lead. I can assure you that.
I hope not.
I hope not. The brand new one is $70 hardcover. The 17th edition from 7 years ago, which is probably still just fucking fine, is $45 new. And I don't see the 16th edition here. Oh, there it is. For some reason, the 16th edition is $50 and the 15th edition is $23.
16 must have had a big update.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, you probably don't want to go that old with this. Also, I forgot to mention the option. Of course, your library probably has this fucking book. So if you need it for just a short period or want to just photocopy the relevant parts, library. But yeah, you don't want to go too old because like some of those older editions would be like when cell phones didn't exist.
Yeah.
And
here's how to cite a telegram.
Right. So...
But anyway, things of the day. So a thing I've really enjoyed lately on YouTube and YouTube Shorts in general I'm bumping into a lot of sort of in media res short microfiction. And this is one of those.
Ooh, I need to get that in my Recs because I am not seeing any of it.
I'm starting to. I bumped into this randomly, and this is a 40-second long YouTube short that I think tells a fairly compelling, extremely succinct story in a novel way. Like it's a good story. It's just titled Consciousness. And if I had to characterize what the story beat is of the reveal at the end of this 40-second video, I think the reveal is, oh no, this is worth watching. And I'm going to make a point of trying to find more sources of short, like poignant microfiction for my next few things of the day.
My recent thing of the day, which I think is still maybe my favorite thing of the day of the past year or two, is Ye Clark Jackson Motorbikes, little story jams, where he plays a little digital instrument, a little song, and a story appears on the screen in subtitle form. Those are amazing short fictions he has there, and he's still going.
So, maybe sometime, some year, it might be worth it. Want to take a trip, maybe us and a few people, and head down to like the International Storytelling Festival? One of those big storytelling festivals now?
Yeah.
Anyway, what do you got?
So this is a website that I guess I've discovered recently. It was promoting itself, I think, podcastindex.org. And it may be a scam, possibly, right? But, the only thing I could find on the site related to making money for the people who create the site was a PayPal donate button, which is rather innocuous, right? There doesn't seem to be any VC behind this or anything that I can tell. And it is a .org URL, which anyone can buy, of course. Yeah. But what it seems like what they are attempting to do, it says that the core podcast index is financed by its founders and stakeholders, podcasters, developers, listeners, right? Corporate interests and advertising are antithetical to our business.
That's good words.
Podcast Index LLC strives to grow. They are an LLC. Strives to grow by providing enhanced API services of value to developers and organizations. So it seems like they want to make their money by having an enormous podcast database that is just free and open to the public. But hey, if anyone wants to query our database for a business interest, pay us money, or rate limit you.
I do have a suspicion that the ultimate guide, this is based solely on what we talked about and me skimming this website for the first time for about 30 seconds. This reeks of get a data set to train machine learning models.
It could, but they don't seem to have done that yet.
No, and honestly, I want GeekNights to be in every machine learning model because we can poison it with our rim and Scottness.
Sure. The point is that they already claim to have over 4 million podcasts in their index, and seeing that archive.org unsurprisingly lost in court again, which we knew was going to happen. Who knows about the future of them? But good news for archive.org is that Google is now linking to them, which who knows what's going to happen there. But at least, regardless of what happens to archive.org, right? Podcasts are really a sort of a safe target to archive, because the vast majority of them are, like just Creative Commons licenses or whatever, and totally okay to save, archive, reserve, and such. I mean, GeekNights definitely is.
Yep.
Right?
We've gone through 4 different Creative Commons licenses over the years. We keep updating.
Yeah.
It.
So it's like, hey, if archive.org goes right, the podcast will be saved. And I think it's also great because so many podcasts, especially of the past, people made podcasts and they hosted them who knows where, and those hosts went away or they hosted, right? And it's like, if they can actually start archiving podcasts and they keep doing, if they can keep this site up for a long period of time, eventually they will have important archives of like podcasts that lasted 3 episodes a long time ago and aren't anywhere else.
I wonder if the Triple H is in there.
Yeah.
The podcast that we knew from ancient times.
Whether it's this site or maybe some other site, right? This is the thing I found that is along those lines. So far, so good, at least.
I'm gonna look at its deal a little more closely.
It definitely is something that needs to be looked at more closely. But the surface level is like,
all right. I think we should just get right into it. I'm not going to do my other news because we're going long and I want to talk a lot about this thing. So way back, actually not way back, we did it fairly recently. On July 3rd, when we reviewed Oku, The Inner Chambers on Geek Nights, we had our news pointing out that there was a Lupin III Kabuki stage play that was streaming in the U.S. with English subtitles.
Streaming in much of the world.
Yeah.
Or at least, I don't know much of the world, but around the world in various places.
But I think the key is a full high production value Kabuki production streamed on a good website that works with English subtitles available to watch. And
they did it live, but then the live performance was saved as a VOD for a whole week. So as long as you could get to this website within a week, you could see it.
Now, the website itself is cool because it's basically like this Kabuki streaming service that's trying to elevate awareness of the art, and there's a lot of good stuff going on.
I guess they couldn't get their Kabuki on Netflix, so they're just going with
do
it themselves. They don't want to do it on YouTube because they just want to sell tickets.
Yep.
Right.
Now,
and make some money because I guess they're not making enough money just doing it in a theater.
And it's Kabuki on Demand, and it's an official video service, and it had some hiccups, but it mostly worked. But I guess, to be clear before we go into this review, we're not going to do an overview of the history and context of Kabuki because this is the first...
Because I don't know it.
This is the first Kabuki production I have ever watched in its entirety. I've only ever seen short clips in my entire life. This is my first actual proper experience with this art form. So I
know that Kabuki theater is a thing. I know that no theater is a thing. Have I ever seen a no stage play? No, I haven't. Right? Pun not intended.
So my broad understanding of Kabuki before we came into this, again, this is just what I thought about it as a person, because I didn't think that much about it, was that it was sort of a newer, more avant-garde form of performance when it first became popular. And it's always middle-aged men, and it's crazy and over the top. That's the 3 things I knew about it. And I didn't really know much else.
And I'd seen, depictions of it in mostly anime, but other Japanese media and other, forms, right? That were referencing it, but I'd never seen an actual Kabuki show in its entirety, as it was.
So having now seen this, we're mostly going to review what we watched just like we would a movie. So we watched the Lupin III Kabuki production, and from a pure entertainment standpoint, comparing it to a movie or a video game or anything else, this thing is fucking amazing, and you should watch it if you can.
It definitely, it wasn't what I expected, because obviously I didn't, because I'd never seen one before.
It was not what I expected.
But it was still pretty great. I'm very happy I saw it.
I was all in from the very beginning to the end. This is super long. At no point was I bored. At no point did I want it to end. This was a peak.
It felt way shorter than it was. It was 3 hours?
Oh my God. It had an intermission that we actually paused it to go take a break before we continued.
Yeah, on the clock, it was really long, but it felt really short. But I mean, hey, if you're paying to go to the theater, buying tickets, you're expecting value, right?
Yep. So I would say if you know anything about Lupin III, you will enjoy this to a high degree. If you have never heard of Lupin III, you'll still enjoy this. If you have no idea what Kabuki is...
I think if you don't know anything about Lupin III, though, some parts might go over your head or not really hit right.
Well, similarly, if you don't know anything about Kabuki, this thing is... Emily was pointing this stuff out. This thing is dense and lousy with inside jokes about kabuki.
Yeah, some of those came through on the subtitles.
Yeah.
But it also gave me the feeling that there was more that I didn't,
Well, like the thing so from the beginning when Goemon is standing there and like he's in this scene that doesn't seem very Lupin-y and he's talking about how beautiful it is outside. The whole thing is this long joke about the fact that Goemon is a character that's super commonly portrayed in kabuki, and that was like a reference to, is it this Goemon? No, it's this totally other Goemon. Like it was this inside joke, and that's what people were laughing at in the audience.
Yeah, and that doesn't come through on the subtitles.
Nope. And the other thing, because Emily explained this to me, but during the show...
But I did know that, like, why is Goemon like that? And then it's like, oh, okay, now he's back to what he's supposed to be.
But also, what I really appreciated, and this, I thought this was... At first, I thought this moment was sort of a moment that was because they thought a lot of people who weren't familiar with kabuki were watching it because of the Lupin angle. But the MC sort of comes out and as a character kind of introduces
the Mamo part.
Yeah,
I love the Mamo part.
The Mamo part was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But it broke the fourth wall.
They broke the fourth wall a lot, even before and after that.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a standard part of kabuki. Kabuki is all about...
I learned that by watching. It was one of the things I learned about kabuki was that breaking the fourth wall is a thing that happens in kabuki all the time.
And that leads to the fourth wall gets broken backwards as well because, as Mamo explained, and then I learned a lot more because I read a lot of Wikipedia after we watched that Lupin, it is intended and was always intended to be an interactive experience. So similar to how a lot of people who experience Shakespeare have a very weird idea of what Shakespeare was really like compared to what it was like back in the day with people throwing shit at the actors and yelling.
I feel like I was told from the very beginning that back in the day, like I remember the first time we learned any Shakespeare in high school, right? The teacher was pretty much a Shakespeare / Mark Twain nerd.
Ooh, lucky.
And New York Yankees nerd. That's the three things that guy cared about in life. Right?
2 out of 3.
And he was before even telling us anything about the plays or the writing or the person, right? The first thing he talked about was the theater. He's like, this is the Globe Theater. Literally the first words. Like, this is the Globe Theater. This is where this is what it looked like. Here's a picture, a drawing, right? He's like, this is where the Shakespeare plays were performed first, right? And mostly, and this is what it was like being there. And then everything else came after that. So I never sort of got that other impression.
I didn't get the proper impression until 10th grade.
This was 10th grade. They didn't give us any Shakespeare until 10th grade.
No, we had 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Every year was a different Shakespeare.
Unless you took the Shakespeare class on purpose, you got one Shakespeare in 10th grade.
But kabuki also is basically the Rocky Horror Picture Show and always was, in that expert audience members will yell things and like you got to be the person who knows. Just like if you go to Rocky Horror, there's the people in the crowd who are going to kind of make the right things happen. The same thing happens.
But that's literally that's 90% of the people. Everyone at the Rocky Horror who wasn't brought there for the first time by a friend is one of those people.
But it's so much more dense than the Rocky Horror thing because like kabuki actors have a stage name that's well known and people will like yell the stage name of the person who is playing the character on stage if they think they're doing a particularly good job in a scene, like to the point of almost interrupting the scene. They get so loud. But apparently there's like a code where they'll yell the name of the father or the grandfather or a predecessor who played that role in the past or who used that stage name in the past. That's like the equivalent of the standing ovation. Like I say your stage name because I think you're doing really good. I say the stage name of the guy who played that character 100 years ago if I think you have surpassed him. Like there's this whole thing going on behind the scenes. So when you're watching this, people just yell and you start to get used to like they yell when someone really is eating the scenery or it's like really milking the performance. So Not to get any more like Kabuki specific stuff, because again, these are just impressions and like me reading Wikipedia.
The point is that you can learn a lot about Kabuki by watching this. They knew that a lot of people watching, and they were hoping would be new to Kabuki, and they did as good a job as they could of trying to introduce you to what's going on without just literally, they explained some things. I think the only thing they literally explained was the searching at night scene thing. But everything else, you just sort of learn by osmosis of, and obviously, like Rim pointed out, there are some things you can't learn if you don't know already or don't speak the language, right? They did as much as they could, given that, they're still early in doing this. They've only done it so many times.
But it starts out so strong where on stage with practical effects, the classic Lupin III title card scroll with the noises and everything just happens over the stage. And that isn't just a Lupin thing. A big part of Kabuki is crazy over-the-top special effects. They were always pushing the bleeding edge of whatever they could get away with in the theater.
Yeah, breaking through the wall. There was a waterfall in one scene. Like, there's literally water falling, and they went in the water.
Yep. There's trapdoors everywhere. Like explosions happen. Like the special effects, that's a big part of it. And the Lupin III does not disappoint in that regard. This is you think Les Mis is impressive with their rotating stage? Fuck that.
Yeah, the production value of the sets was somewhere in between like the Broadway and the opera, but also a little bit like in some ways cheap too, right? Like a high school play, but in some ways not cheap, right? It's like a high school play got a bunch of money and went fancy, but it was still high schoolers that did.
Yep. You know what it's like when the high schoolers do the Peter Pan thing, but they get the harness and the one kid gets to be on the harness doing the flying.
And they did it correctly, and
and they didn't die or anything.
Yeah.
But
the other thing I noticed, right, was that, which I guess is sort of I guess a caricature of Kabuki that I had known just from seeing it referenced, was how they always move their head like, and then they pause in like a face that's like a really expressive face.
Yep.
And they sort of like do that a lot, right? And it's like, oh, that's not like making fun of them. It's like that's part of the form, is doing that on purpose.
Yep. And it's cool because what it seems to do, it's almost like you could have someone just telling you a story, or you could have someone acting in what we would consider a traditional bog standard play of actually showing what happened.
I'm sure there's a Japanese name for it, right? I just don't know what that name is.
But this is almost like every scene in a kabuki is designed around the big moments and the big poses and like the caricatured, like larger than life, like they end in the pose that you'd see in the woodcut. Like imagine if every scene in a movie ended in the pose that the character had on the movie poster.
Yeah, it makes me think about certain mangas that I've seen. Like Blade of the Immortal, I think, is the preeminent example. Where if you read the manga Blade of the Immortal, it's like samurai type fighting, right, and stuff, right? But then it's like there's this like mega splash pages, which are like there are mangas out there with elaborate splash pages, but Blade of the Immortal is like maybe number one in terms of elaborate splash page, and it's like ba-bam, it's like like freeze frame on this exact moment in the action, mega explosions, action lines everywhere, right? And they do that on stage effectively by, pausing at this exact moment where, the people, the poses and the expressions are like frozen in time for a second.
It's like you take everything and make it as over dramatic and big as you possibly can, but yet what you're doing that to is like one beat of a story. Like Goemon and Lupin meet and they do this like extremely choreographed thing that just expresses the moment where they met. It's almost like poetry on stage through interpretive dance.
All right. So as far as the story, it was a pretty much like cookie cutter Lupin story.
Bogs right down to the point of, what's this? Robots? Huh, that's interesting. Well, they can't take our jobs. And of course the robots are going to be the plot. Like it's every Lupin story.
Exactly. It's like they followed the Lupin formula with no deviation whatsoever. And in fact, even despite my quite relatively vast, not, as vast as others, but quite large Lupin knowledge, I was fooled one time. I thought that it was Lupin in disguise, but it was Goemon in disguise, and Lupin in disguise came second.
I also got gotten by that. We're sitting
Okay,
there.
not alone. I'm like, that's just Lupin in disguise. It's oh my god, I'm like 90% sure, 100% sure. And it's like, and then it's like, nope, it was Goemon in disguise.
So
Lupin
one thing Emily was telling me, this is
enters the scene later.
But it's why Lupin fits so well, because a lot of the tropes of Lupin movies are also tropes of all kabuki. One of the big ones is a character is in disguise and then there's a big reveal. And another one is a sudden and dramatic transformation of a character, usually into like a demon or something, which
that happened at the end.
Robot Krauser pops out at the end.
That's right.
I loved every second of this, and I think what really, really stood out is that knowing nothing about this art form and just coming in, this was not hard to follow at all. This wasn't like reading The Tale of Genji, where I had to like really concentrate to figure out what the hell was going on.
Even though it was clearly, not speaking the language, lost in translation, no cultural reference, no historical knowledge, it's still entertaining, even if it wasn't Lupin, right? You're still getting entertainment. You would not be disappointed if I traveled to Japan. I would definitely have go to Kabuki Theater on the list of to-do lists.
I intend to watch more Kabuki. I want to learn more about this form. From what I can
I don't
tell,
intend to like study it hardcore, but if someone's like, you want to watch a Kabuki, I'd be like, fuck yeah.
Like, I want to know about as much as this as I know about like wushu films. Like, I know enough to appreciate them, but I'm not an expert. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I go to the opera like once or twice a year. It's like, what the fuck do I know about opera? Not much.
Yep.
Right? It's like, I know the name of the person who made this opera that I'm seeing. I know the plot. I know singing is hard.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, does it make it less entertaining? No. It's like, it doesn't mean you should have to, you don't have to know the complete history of like fucking everything you ever, every art that you ever interact with, right? It's like everyone playing video games today doesn't know the history of video games. Right? It's like, and that's,
I mean, we're weird. There's a micro generation that knows the entire history of video games because the entire history of video games happened during their lives while they were playing them.
A vanishingly small percentage of people, which we are a part of, have read the first novel and have also read other novels. Most people reading novels didn't read the first novel.
Yeah.
So like 99.999% of them. And that's okay.
But
so you can see a kabuki and have a fun time without knowing shit about it or even ever bothering to learn more. You'll still, you'll be entertained enough. But of course, if you're an intellectual, you can enhance your entertainment and cultural learnings. And I wonder, right? It's like we're so familiar with the fact that we even know, just knowing the word kabuki and knowing that it is a form of stage performance is because of our exposure to, Japanese culture via animes, mangas, video games, and nerdy biz. Come on, where's the stage performances of other countries that I don't know about? Is there some like Brazilian form of stage performance that I don't even know exists that maybe is awesome and I just never even heard of it? I don't even know the word for it. What other countries we got? It's like, come on, I want to see other people's theater.
So I'm not sure at this exact moment where and how you can watch this. We'll figure it out, but this is
the website. Though, what was the website again?
It was actually weirdly hard to Google. Like I kept finding a website that wasn't the one. It's Kabuki on Demand.
It's Mirail. It's MIR.
Yep.
AIL.
Video.
.video. And then at the bottom, you'll see, click here to see, you just got to scroll down and you'll see, click here to see our lineup, Shochiku official video service, Kabuki on Demand. And you click on that shit.
Oh, Lupin the Third is the top one listed when I go there. And if
you click on it, can you watch it?
You can rent it right now.
For 4,000 yen, you can rent it. And there are actually 11 to choose from. Oh, one of them's a trailer. So there's 10 to choose from.
Yep.
Heron Maiden, Five Thieves, Pulling the Carriage Apart, Lover Suicide at Sonozaki, The Priest, Shunkan, Yoshitsune and the 1,000 Cherry Trees. I know
every one of these looks good, but
Letters for the Pleasure Quarters.
But I guess
Sukaroku Flower and Two Maidens. I wrote Pulling the Carriage Apart. That's got to be the best one, right?
So I recommend this as strongly as we can as Geek Nights. This is an S tier thing that you should watch.
Oh, the Lupin one was 4,000 yen. Pulling the carriage apart is 33 minutes and 800 yen.
Ooh, ooh.
Oh, it says English streaming period until October 31st, 2024. Maybe I'll just watch this today.
Ah, not a bad idea.
30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, if the Lupin the Third is 2 hours and 42 minutes, like.
Oh, I remember it being longer. Okay.
Well, because I guess that doesn't count the intermission.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, these other ones are shorter. The Yoshitsune one's an hour and 10 minutes.
All right, good to know.